Hello, hello. This is Irene with SaugaTalks. Hello, thank you for our loyal followers, all right? And those who are new, please make sure, okay, you like what we're doing and you comment and you send our clips, our videos, wherever you are, our podcast, to your network, to your peers, to your friends, because I'm Irene Lakovetsky. I speak with fascinating people in tech, and I'm incredibly thankful to fantastic leaders, experts, authors, advisors who really generous with their time. Okay, so we're working for you, so please give us little like here and there, a little sympathy, so that more people can hear, can learn from the fantastic experts. Ravi Pal is here with us today. Ravi, how are you?
I'm very good. Very good to see you, Irene. Thank you for
Absolutely.
having me.
Yeah, pleasure is mine because with your incredible experience and just career journey, but most importantly, with your expertise, I'm sure we'll have tons of valuable insights for the audience today because we're going to talk about purpose driven AI. All right. That's almost like a cliche now. All right. Everybody kind of chasing it. All right. It will be very important to hear what does it mean for you? I mean, aligning mission, with goals, with customer needs, with all AI strategies that companies again chasing right.
Yeah, well, I think while it may sound like a topic of current, but it is still a very relevant, important topic to talk about. Look, where I want to start with is set some context, right? How did we all get started with this technology AI, right? So in 22 December, right, if I got the dates right, or 21 December, couple of years ago, this technology comes out of nowhere, and everybody's just mesmerized that how do we use it? So here is a solution. Let's find the problem. And as the brands and organizations, businesses get familiar with this technology, they're looking at their competition announcing something, or some brands, the financial value going up just because they pivoted to being an AI company. So it kind of creates that panic, right, for any leadership or any organization, that are we just getting being left behind by our competition. So
Fear
it
of
kind of
missing out. Yes,
you're missing
exactly.
out, right? So the FOMO, exactly, right? So that leads to a very different kind of adoption. Let's call it panic-driven adoption and not really purpose-driven adoption, right? And I think that's the crux at where last 2 years were spent, where people were just trying to adopt this technology out of this panic, or like you say, fear of missing out, instead of really defining the core purpose with which they wanted to transform their own organization or leverage this beautiful, incredible technology.
Yeah, that sounds like sounds common sense, okay? And yet, less and less people do have common sense because, again, leaders out there, technologists, business people, right? They're pressed with delivery deadlines, right? With their customer, the best customer experiences, the best, the pressures, all the pressures that people feeling from the board, from management, everywhere, right, left and right. And now technology is evolving, right? Where we were, what, a year, 2 years ago, is actually changing, right? And many
Yeah.
people are overwhelmed. Okay, so what's your take on this entire ecosystem? Because we're being shaken as we speak.
No, will continue to evolve at the rapid pace that we are. So it's frightening because of the pace. At the same time, it's exciting because this has never happened. I mean, I think for a technologist like me, it is just exciting times. Purely speaking for myself. But we also need to look at a couple of other data points. So MIT report just came out, was all over the social media, that 95% of these initiatives are failing. On the other hand, this year alone, about 42% of these AI initiatives were abandoned by. So this was a different, research report that quoted this. 42% of those were abandoned. So there is something that is not working. Yet the estimates are that by 2027, the AI spend, or software AI spend, would go up to $300 billion. So with what's happening, we should be concerned, like, will that $300 billion go to waste, or it'll be purposefully used by the organizations or clients or agencies like ourselves. So I think what's important is that, going back to your original point, that we kind of identify, take a step back and then say, so how do we really, start taking advantage of this? It could be done in a couple of ways. One, and purpose could be a burdensome word, right? Like, for some people, it's like, highly strategic. But we can look at it from current lens as, multi-layered problem. We could look at it as if you are sitting in board or, the leadership position, you may want to define is your organization ready for future, right? From the lens of saying in 2 years, 3 years time, I want to be AI native organization. That's looking at it from a strategic purpose. But if you're looking somewhere in your organizational layer or stack, where your primary responsibility is to execute these initiatives, then you're looking to operationally define a purpose whereby you're saying that any initiative that you launch, there's a KPI, and that KPI maps to some C-level objective that it's getting defined above. And in between, you can look at different. So a marketing team can have a purpose that is brand specific or brand led, right? So therefore, I look at this as you define the core objective, call it purpose or what have you, by different layers, who you are, what you are in the organization. And then start to leverage this from going away from these utilities, pilots, or what have you, and start building things which are useful to achieve something which moves the needle positively to achieve your organization's objectives, and not necessarily do it for the technology's sake, right? So, I mean, if I was to take an example, right? So if you're asking yourself a question that, how fast can I deploy this technology? It's a good question to ask, but if that's the primary question you're asking, then you're basically again panic-led, right? But if you're asking the question that what problem can I solve with it, and which particular objective or KPI can I move with this technology, then you're asking a question which is worth investing this technology into.
I see, actually, with this fast evolving landscape, all right, many leaders become even more reluctant. How about that? Okay, in the craze of it all that you mentioned, right, in the hype of it all, guess what? All right, adapting or even looking at new vendor. I don't know, but in my years around the industry, okay, I see it's not any easier right now, because people trying to be triple careful, because everyone sees these fantastic, wonderful AI examples, and I don't know, painting the town red, all right, what you can do with it. Problem is, okay, that everyone's budget is thin, right? Everyone's responsibility and pressure is high. So question would be, right, when again, business leaders looking for solution, all right, they don't even know that they have the problem. How about that? So it's age old conversation. What do you see is happening?
No, that's like you said, that's a problem that kind of has existed with any new technology or any transformative technology. And this in particular is, I always say this, right? So this technological advancement is slightly different from the old ones. So more, you can use the same frames, but you also need to try and understand this in its own context and try and come up with its own plan, so to say, to use it in your organization. So let me give you an example, right? And then I'll try and bring it back to your question. And this is my own experience. So I started as a skeptic, right? So to begin with, a couple of years ago, whether this is going to be production ready, it is one of those, again, metaverse kind of a hype, like everybody jumped onto it, but is it real? Is it, enterprise ready and what have you? But then I had to use it for myself to really understand what this technology brings to an organization, or how can it further my, or advance my objectives in the organization. So the position I sit in as CTO, I also have to look at my organization's evolution as into an AI first organization, but I also work with clients where I'm trying to understand their objectives and how those objectives are getting fulfilled. So here's an example. It's actually a pretty great story. we were given an opportunity by a luxury brand to come and show the potential of this, art of the possible with this technology. So me and the team go back, we build a great prototype. We spend a couple of weeks, come up with everything technology proof, in the sense that we ask the right questions, right? That is the accuracy great for the prototype that we have built? Is the performance great for the prototype that we have built? Is it hallucinating or not hallucinating? So we looked at all the usual technological problems for from the prototype standpoint. We go in, we present to the client team. Everything goes well. We are super happy. The meeting is about to end, and the senior client asked us a simple question. They said, "Everything is good, but it just doesn't sound like us." So if you now take that answer and reflect back, and you're like, so did we not understand how to use this technology right? So, and then that was the moment you have these light bulb moments, right? And you think about, like, this technology is very different to the old technologies. And I was like, this is not just a technological problem, it's also like an identity problem, because the way client asked the question, it had two lessons in it. One lesson was who you are talking to. So I was talking to the marketing client. So, I had to obviously address it from that lens. But the other was they were not looking at it as like a technology, but they were looking at it as an identity, right? Because they were looking at it like, does it work like us? Does it think like us? Does it, speak like us? And that led me to, a different kind of a framework from at least, my personal, understanding standpoint. And then, that's what I've propagated. Hopefully to your listeners, it'll be useful. What I thought about was that, if we treated this as this incredibly smart, superpower, having superpowers, but a very naive employee, right, who works with us now, but we need to figure out how to make it successful in our context, which means that now we need to give it information, we need to give it R&R, and we need to give it some sort of a toolkit so that it can learn, work with us, and behave like it has worked with us for tens of years, can act like a veteran, whether you're a luxury goods company, whether you're a software development company or an agency, creativity-driven agency like us. But you can use that framework then to make sense of this technology, and then drive your conversations forward, right? So what we called it was, this needs a constitution, right? It needs a job, and it also needs a toolbox, and that will help us sort of get this going in all contexts, in all possible contexts. Otherwise, like you said, the speed or the evolution of this technology, yesterday it was LLMs, today it is agents and agentic AI, tomorrow it'll be something else. We'll get caught in this. So we need a very simple way to look at it, and then start to use it in all possible frames of how to apply this in our day to day. Does that kind of address, Irene, the question you were
It
asking, or
helps,
did I miss it?
absolutely. Yep, it helps. You mentioned very few key words in terms of identity, brand identity, authenticity, even. Okay.
Yeah,
So looks like lots of tools out there, right? That's pushing fantastic productivity gains, right? But without authenticity, without trust, right, those tools not going to reach the customer. So how do
yeah.
you see? I know you've been on both sides, I'm sure. Okay. Acquiring the solutions and providing the solutions. All right. So what's a kind of smart thing, way of thinking about it?
Yeah, so I can give it to you in two pillars, and I'm sure there are different ways to think about it. But one is, I'll extend my argument of what I just made recently, which is about, okay, so if you think about this, and if you want to create some sort of body of knowledge for this employee, which aka AI agents, agentic AI, whatever you want to call it. So you kind of have a constitution which is about what are the facts that this thing needs to learn. So grounding truth, and that becomes the basis of for it to acquire a personality or talk about a subject from some fact, some library of truth, right? The second is that does it have its own unique voice? So in the sense that if it is working with me, then does it understand my body of work, how I think about this, what kind of blogs I write? And therefore, when it talks on my behalf to, let's say, anybody, then it kind of uses the same language, same pattern, same voice, right? It doesn't get, or if I use the luxury clients example, then it is not talking about or defending the price tag. It is basically, communicating the value, which is the craftsmanship, the longevity of the product and stuff like that, right? And then the last could be about the red lines, right? Like, what it should or should not do, right? So should it make any financial claims, or should it and try and, talk about the competition or talk about something else which is not asked in that context, right? So that is one frame. So if you look at it from that lens, then you can start to build the insurance policy, but keep it on brand, develop that trust. So you kind of, use it in the right way. The other frame is if I apply the CTO lens, and like you said, so there are a lot of vendors approaching me, or a lot of my own employees approach me with ideas. Then how do I filter through those? So you have to develop a library of questions, right? So like a high filter library, or whatever you want to call it. And the questions are very simple, right? The first question has to be, so what area this, so the problem that you're trying to solve, which area is it in? Is it furthering our customer experience agenda? Is it solving a problem for my customer? In this case, customer could be my client, or clients and customer. Can you write it in a simple sentence, the problem that we're trying to solve? So usually if you can't, then obviously it's not a well-defined problem. Or you can ask the question as to, has anybody else used this technology in the last 6 months, practically, either in production or from a proof of potential standpoint. Or you can ask it of it in terms of, are we solving a capability problem, and are we developing a capability agenda or a dependency agenda? What that means is that sometimes what we do, we will go train people on something. Right. So let's say when AI came out, everybody was training their employees on prompt techniques. So if you had 100 employees, and then you said, okay, I trained 90% of my employees, they all have whatever that level of certification was. So everybody's happy, right? Suddenly, oh, we've got 90% of our workforce AI ready. But 4 or 5 months down the line, you may want to check another metric, that did you create dependency, as in, are these employees now using their own, do they think for themselves, or everything now goes into the chat box? And then whatever comes out is what's now being dished out as an original thought process. And if you're a creative company, or for that matter, even if you write code, this will catch up to you, because everything will start to sound similar, boilerplate-ish, and you will have challenges as you like 4, 5, 6 months down the line, you will have to look at a very different matrix, right? So you kind of filter through depending on what the problem, what is the problem you're facing, or which area or direction in which you're trying to solve that problem.
We're not gonna get silver bullet answer, all right, because it is, again, it is very human conversation that those adoption teams having, like you said. I've learned recently an interesting thought, because use cases were bread and butter of technology presentation. Adoption looks like it's a new language that was created in this industry years ago, right, for different purposes. That, hey, have a use case conversation, and that's how you're going to relate to people you're trying to push your solution to, right? But lately I've heard usefulness, because use cases, as we both know, been invented in the lab more often than in real life. So how do you bridge the fantastic intent, okay, and fabulous slides and now video presentations and all that, right, with usefulness for people, so you can have heart-to-heart conversation about what's really bothering them?
Yeah, no, that's actually a very nuanced point. I think if I could further your question a little bit before I respond to it. When this technology came out, everybody was just looking at the text, right? So it can write like us, like it could write a poem, it could write a script, or what have you, right? And then came the images, right? So now from a multimodal standpoint, people were sort of experimenting with images, etc., right? So it sort of became about automation more than anything else. right? So to your point, initial quote unquote use cases were all about automation, right? Whether you can write more code and automatically and what have you, right? But then I think as the technology is evolving, and I speak for myself for sure, but I've seen a lot of other thinkers around me do the same. All of us have now started to think about this as a scale and a speed problem solution than a pure automation or like what you're referring to as a use case problem. And we look at it as like, could we apply this at a scale where, we generally can't write algorithms as fast because this is a general purpose technology. We can steer it to, solve different problems. So could I use it as scale? So as an example, for my personal, first I'll take how do I use it today, right? I had a system whereby, if I was researching a topic, I will go write my, theme of that topic, put it in one AI, get an answer, take that, take it to another AI, get probably a better answer, then apply a, LLM as a judge, as a critique, or what have you, right? So you have a system. You develop a system over a period of time. I automated that by creating some step one, step two, step three kind of a process. But then I realized that I didn't get what I was looking for because eventually the decision has to be made by me. So I'm reading a lot more text, right? So then what I did was I gave it 3 or 4 different perspectives. So I said, okay, why don't you go and do this research as a professor? So more pragmatic, right? Or look at this topic. The second voice I gave it was like, look at it as a startup founder. So now more aggressive, more optimistic voice. Then I said, okay, now look at it as a consultant. So look at it from 3, 4 different frames and, create it. So I gave it different voices. And the reason of it was more than automating the system, I wanted different perspectives presented to me so that I could look at the broader spectrum and then I can make a decision. How do I want to look at that research? Right? So now, if I was to take that example that I'm using for myself and apply it in a business sense, then what you're trying to do, you're trying to apply it at a broader perspective at scale. So if you're trying to solve a customer service problem and you say, I'm applying AI in a customer service, that's like a use case to your point. But if you change that and you say that I want a churn reduction specialist, so that becomes a usefulness. And therefore, so then what you're trying to do is that whatever you build, now you first of all, you've given it an identity that you are a specialist who is solving the churn reduction problem for me. Now go and identify 10% of potential customers who might churn, and then identify at least 1% of them strategy so that we can retain them. Right. So you've given it a specific identity, a job, and an objective. Right. So it becomes more useful as an technology or output of that technology from a usefulness standpoint. Right. Now, the part two is, and why this is more important for this technology than other. I personally believe, and this is a question or debate that I've had with many people. That today also we look at this technology also like, hey, this we need to code it. We need to tell how to find an yes and a no answer. So we still treat it like deterministic programmatic problem. Whereas to take full advantage, we need to look at it as a goal-oriented or intent-driven technology. So I should be giving it a goal, put some steer, some safeguards, so that it doesn't go and create something completely random. But then, if you give it a goal, an agency, then it'll give you broader perspective, like I described in my own personal example, and then using those larger patterns, you will be able to achieve things that you can't achieve otherwise. So think of it this way, right? So if you're launching a new product, and typically a plan that you would create, what do I need to learn? How did I do it last time? How many months did it take? What all sort of research I needed to do? Then what kind of campaign I need to come up with? Yada, yada, right? So you'll come up with a lot of scenarios. Use AI at scale, give it the problem and let it identify the patterns for you. What drives conversion? What content works? what are the 4 or 5 things that you need to start with when you go or launch this product in the new market. The 6 months plan could potentially be done in days, maybe 10, 15 days. And that's the beauty of this, right? So I think that's the way I look at it, and the usefulness that I can define from my perspective.
Fantastic, fantastic. I'm sure you have tons of examples. Could you share one, two, how many it is, with successful approach? How about that? Because everyone wants to hear, that it works for this company and maybe, my project will be as successful, something exciting, and then maybe something disastrous, Ravi, because people remember, other people's like funny negative stories, believe it or not, right? So something in that realm, please.
Don't want to sort of amplify disasters, but here are again in linking it to the conversation we've had so far. I'll give you 2 examples of where panic driven, if I use the original theme, examples don't work. And then we can look at some of the things that where I've seen it work. I'll take an example that has worked in my context. So, going back to that panic driven example, everybody sort of started to launch this chat GPT like chat features on their web properties, right? Website, mobile application, what have you, irrespective of what kind of product or service they were offering. So I know enough folks who did it, and then the adoption basically crash landed. It probably started 30-40% customers tried it, and then it probably became negligible in like a couple of months' time. And the core reason of that was, so when you use that ChatGPT interface for, like, if I go on ChatGPT or you go, it's a general purpose chat, right? So I could go and ask anything. So I don't have to think about where to start, right? It could be mathematical problem, it could be programmatic problem, or it could be poem, or it could be anything else, right? But when you go to an automobile website, and you have this chat presented to you, you have to think about, like, where do I start? What is the question I'm supposed to ask versus discovering this product or specification or what have you, right? So very different. But if you have thought about customer first and what problem am I solving, you would have done it differently. It probably could have been similar solution, but done differently, right? This is a first-hand information. The other one is more of a interesting example I read, and it leads to a completely different conversation. I don't know if we'll have time to talk about it today, but so there was this financial institute where 2 different departments using the same, which is AI technology, their own data. So one department goes after a customer segment with the that segment is identified as potential growth for them. So they go after chasing them, that we need to acquire these customers because these are growth customers for us. In the same institution, the other department actually, which is I believe the risk department, goes and identifies the same segment as the high risk customers. Same organization, 2 departments, using the similar data or probably siloed data within the organization, and reaching out to the same set of customers but identifying them as 2 completely different segments, right? So these are a couple of examples where these things don't work. And to the point that MIT report meant, or a couple of other reports are stating as to people are abandoning these initiatives or what have you. So to some extent, that's because of these reasons, because they haven't seen the ROI against the investment they made, or in some cases because of organization is not being ready. The second example, where there are silos potentially which are preventing a positive use of this technology, right? So you're creating more friction and confusion within your customer set, right? So that's one set of an example. The second set, which is like how it works or where it works. So both sides. So first, let me talk about my team. So we obviously do software supply chain, which means we work for technology software built for our clients. So we deliver services for our clients. We used this technology to look at ourselves, our teams, our roles, our software development process, and we tried identifying the micro well defined with KPIs, controlled experiments. And then we said we're going to apply this agentic AI process to each of our roles in the handover process, one by one, and then we'll craft a more, sort of automated, intelligent software supply chain where the core objective was that can we gain productivity by 30% as an objective. So we defined very well, thought through sort of a strategy with a clearly defined goal, objective, KPI, and so on and so on, right? Um, what was important in this was like we didn't look at it as efficiency and therefore we got to look at the cost cutting or what have you. We looked at it as a productivity gain, which means can we identify use cases where timing is a constraint? So somebody can only work 8 hours. But what if we found where this technology could work for 20 hours? So next day the employee can come back, human can come back and review the results, right? So you unlock something new. The second thing we identified was so there are certain kind of skills which are in short supply, like architects are in short supply. So expertise, how can we expand that expertise for the rest of the team? So can we codify certain aspects of automation into this technology, going back to the identity and the toolbox example, right? So we did that. And both of these objectives actually paid rich dividends for us. So we're able to use this to now, write user stories more effectively. We're able to do QA more effectively, at least look at the boilerplate stuff in a way that, the resources don't become the constraints, right? That's one example where it absolutely worked because of, these well-defined, objectives. And then the other example would be where we use a combination. I call it compound AI systems because typically when you're solving a well-defined business problem, you can't just look at it as one utility, as an point solution, or you can't just put all the eggs in this one probabilistic basket. So you kind of want to build a system where a deterministic and probabilistic systems come together. So we're doing, for a bunch of our clients, solutions where we use the historical data, which is the grounding data, codify it into machine learning, the classic machine learning, call it predictive AI, and then combine it with the generative AI, depending on whether we are trying to codify it into an agent for autonomous kind of reasoning, or we want to use generative AI for qualitative reasoning or like a knowledge management system or what have you, like a RAG solution. And then as a joint solution, we're able to solve wide variety of problems, right? So you can talk to your repository of knowledge, like a query, and you will get well-defined answers. So if I have thousands of dumps of PPTs of stuff that I've done, whether I'm a product services company or like a software company like us, I can now talk to my knowledge base, right? So I can do that, or I could solve the problem of predicting whether the next email campaign that I'm going to launch for target segment A or B, how would it perform and what should I do so that I have a better predictability of this working against the objective or KPI for this campaign. So I could do that, right? Or I could have an agent which, based on historical data, could go and every month run and scout for opportunities. What new campaign should I launch that I haven't thought about, right? So those are the ones where we've actually seen positive traction. This works because these have well-defined, obviously KPIs or objectives, as well as, the solution-wise, we've found the grounded data for it to work on something and not just plain simple vanilla LLM because they don't understand you, they don't understand your context.
Here is a good point to encourage everyone to follow Ravi Pal on LinkedIn. Ravi, I know you have a fantastic blog, okay? So please talk to us where people can find you and what are the best resources to reach.
So you can see if this is going on video, then Ravi Pal 1214 is my Twitter handle. That'll be or X handle. It's no more Twitter. It's x.com. So that'll be the first place, and I think from there you can obviously go to my blog. Otherwise, my blog is ai.superpal.blog. Easier to remember. That's where you can find whatever I write.
Fantastic, Ravi. Time is flying in good company. I so appreciate your time. I so appreciate your very practical, very lived in advice, all right, to our audience. So, in conclusion of today's episode, could you maybe share like few takeaways? Okay, because we did touch on a lot of moving parts, lots of important points, but kind of narrow it down and give people something they can think about that a little bit more actionable.
Yeah. So I think as leaders, one of the things, like, and I apply this to myself. So I would say that don't be mesmerized by the magic that is AI. Um, Try and find mastery for it, like master it, so that you can give it a direction with purpose, in context of whatever work, role, job, function that you're part of. So that's one. I think that's terribly important. Then there are two, three things I can leave everybody with. One, we have to get out of this prototype plateau, right? Everybody's still doing prototypes. I think this technology is mature enough for you to take the plunge and define a path from pilot to production. Very important. Otherwise, you are genuinely now have a fear of missing out. That's where we started, right? Um, don't get stuck in capability mirage. Really identify the matrix for capability development. Don't do I train my people and that's it, right? That could be a mirage. You have to really identify what are the skills you want to build, what role changes you want to bring in your organization. Again, depends on the process. If you're a marketing team, you're a software development team, or what have you. That'll be the second takeaway. And I think the third one would be that you obviously want to make sure that you kind of identify that strategic long-term perspective if you're a leadership team, and then you drive your entire organization behind that by creating some rails, as we call them, so that you can drive the train on those rails.
Thank you, Ravi. Appreciate you spending time with us today. Thank you.
Thank you, Irene. Thank you.